What's up, everyone? I'm Tara Talmadge alongside our senior analyst, Mike Irwin, and it is time, as always, for everyone's favorite segment, Ask Mike. And Mike, we start every week with a COVID update as it relates to college football. What do you know?
Some pretty good news, and we've had good news for the last, 3 or 4 weeks. And it has always related to the number of guys testing positive, because if we go back to when all these teams reassembled and they first started those strength and conditioning workouts, and you had these outbreaks, and you had Houston shutting down, and you had LSU had, 30 guys under quarantine. I think Iowa State may have shut down at one point. Texas had some problems. Alabama had some problems. That all has settled down, and now there was good news this week. First of all, we got this announcement that they are going to play college football. Yeah. But in regard to that, Hunter Yurachek, Arkansas's athletic director, did a Zoom, and he said the latest test that they had done, which was last week, and I think that involved everybody, all the athletes, all the coaches, all the staff people, and nobody tested positive. So that's an incredible number. Now, there's still a couple of 3 guys under quarantine right now, or self-isolation. They're probably out by now. That's been a trend too. People tend to freak out over these numbers. Oh, 6 people tested positive. Well, if you put all of them into self-isolation and they go to their apartment for a week or 10 days and then come back out and they're not sick, it's not a major issue. So things are looking good in that respect, but we're also now entering into a totally different phase, which I'll talk more about when we talk about the workouts. But these August camp workouts are different. They're different from what they've done before, and there are new challenges with regard to that. Well,
let's get to some of the questions that we have for you. Our first question this week comes from METROPOLISHOG, who says, with Notre Dame reportedly playing a 10-game ACC schedule and sharing their NBC revenue, I feel like the ACC is one step closer to becoming the first super conference. If Notre Dame decides to stay in the ACC, do you feel like that will cause the SEC to start making moves to go to 16 teams in the offseason?
Well, I don't think that what he just laid out is what would cause it to happen. But here's how it could happen. Let's go back to when Mark Emmert, the NCAA president, just sort of unilaterally shut everything down right about the time of the SEC tournament. It was just, it's all gone.
Yeah.
He apparently did not discuss this with any of the ADs, any of the coaches. He just made that decision, and they were really, really mad about it. In fact, Hunter Yurachek recently said that he thinks that was done too soon.
Yeah,
there wasn't any consultation, and they might have figured out a way to play the NCAA basketball tournament. Okay, now let's fast forward to what's going on right now. When the announcement was made, okay, here's the various conferences have said, here's how we're going to play football. And we know the SEC is moving everything back about 4 weeks. Other conferences are doing different things. But as a result of that, they also announced, and this would be your BCS teams, what we used to call Division I, which they have their own championship, and we know what it is. It's a 3-game thing. You have 4 teams. They each play the first weekend, and then you're down to 2, and you play a national championship. Yeah. Okay, the BCS teams control that championship. They do it.
Right.
And they said, we're going to play that. Well, Mark Emmert stepped in and basically said, okay, that's fine, but we control all these other sports, and we may not play them because it could be too dangerous. And that really ticked a lot of these people off again, because they're going, well, who gives this guy the right to just announce these things without discussing it with us? So there's been a lot of discussion that these Power 5 ADs, the people that are in charge of those 5 conferences, are miffed about this. And when this season is over, in the offseason, they may sit down and say, look, we've got to do something to control all of our championships, not just football. And the only way you're going to do that is to either get the NCAA to give up control of all of those championships, or you're going to have to just disband yourself or leave the NCAA and start your own version of that, a new version of the NCAA, which you control. And you would control your own championships in all sports. Now, if that happens, you're talking about 5 conferences. Now, it won't just be the teams that are in it now. They will. I'm fairly sure that if this happens, they will go look at some mid-majors. Probably the ones that have a really good fan base, draw a lot of fans to their games, and are good draws on television. They may
Right.
talk to the network people and say, hey, who draws well on TV? And they'll come up with a list of these so-called mid-majors, and they will invite them into this new version of the NCAA. But it will be greatly reduced from what it is now. And then what will happen is that you're probably talking about each of these 5 conferences having 2 8-team divisions. There's right now 14 teams in the SEC. You would have 8 teams in each division, and you'd have 16 teams. And that's what he's referring to. I'm saying that it could happen. I don't think it's going to happen because of what the ACC is doing, but I do think it could happen as a result of what Mark Emmert is doing with these power control moves that he's been making lately because of COVID.
Our next question comes from PARALLAXPIG. Great question right here. Are you in favor of moving this year's Texas A&M game to College Station so we could get return game in Fayetteville?
Yeah, I think this is a great idea, and here's why. If you go to College Station this year, that's a 100,000 seat stadium. With COVID distancing, you're probably talking about 30,000 fans. If you're going to have to go there, you'd much rather go there and play in front of 30,000 than the full 100,000. But the next year when the Aggies come to Fayetteville, you got to assume COVID's going to be over one way or another, and then you may have 7. They may have set a new record. They've never filled this stadium up with the new North End Zone project. Supposedly it went up from 72,000 to about 76,000. They've always had the ability to add bleacher-type seats on that upper deck on the south end. If they did all of that, you could approach 80,000 for a game. Would the Aggies draw that kind of crowd? Well, if Sam Pittman's got it going and people are excited, possibly. So you could be trading a game with 30,000 people in College Station for a game in Fayetteville with 78,000, 80,000 in Fayetteville. So yeah, I think it's a great trade-off.
But see, here's the follow-up though. It's at AT&T Stadium typically. Do you like having the games there?
I personally do like it, and we've discussed this before. I think that when that contract runs out, Arkansas will figure out a way to continue to play games there. But that's why I don't think they may agree to play A&M this year in College Station and then next year in Fayetteville. After that, I think it goes right back to Arlington for the remainder of 2 or 3 years or however long it is of the contract, because Arkansas needs that time to come up with teams that they can play in Arlington. So I think this whole thing could end up being a really good thing for Arkansas.
All right, Lanny wants to know, now that the SEC has announced a 10-game conference-only schedule, which 2 extra SEC East teams will Arkansas play?
Even before that announcement was made last week about moving the season back to the last week in September and how this would all happen, there was a lot of talk that Arkansas was going to end up by playing a conference-only schedule at 10 games. You got to add 2 teams. I don't care who you are. You got to add 2 teams from the other side of the division. If you're in the East, you got to add 2 West teams. From the West, you got to add 2 East teams. And everyone was talking about, okay, Arkansas is going to get Georgia and South Carolina. And people were like, why them? Well, because those are the next 2 teams after this year. Next year, I don't know which one it is, but next year I think it may be Georgia. The year after that, it could be South Carolina. And so they were thinking, well, they'll just move ahead and get those 2 teams and move them in now. But that doesn't really seem like a logical thing to do. The logical thing to do would be to go back and pick the last 2 teams, which would be Kentucky from a year ago, and we know that game was in Lexington. So that game would, if you did that, would become a Fayetteville game. And then 2 years ago, Arkansas played Vanderbilt here, so that would become a game in Nashville. Now, if Arkansas gets Kentucky and Vanderbilt, Razorback fans will be ecstatic.
Much better.
That would be great. Much better than Georgia and South Carolina. And so you kind of hope that's what happens, but the SEC does not have a history of doing things that help Arkansas. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen. And it could be something totally different. I've talked about the fact that they could start looking at who has okay, this team has an open date here. What team from the other division has that same open date? You're playing each other. So there's a lot of different scenarios. That's being worked out right now. We were told it could happen this week or maybe next week.
Yeah, I think it was a week to 10 days is what Hunter Yurchek said on when we would be finding out that schedule. Hog fan in Texas asks, if our scheduled 10 games start on September 26th, When can the team start practicing?
Well, I mean, they've been practicing in one form or another since June. And, you know, they started with strength and conditioning, then they went to coaches are out there and they're running agility drills, but everybody's socially distanced.
Yeah.
Then toward the end of last month, they went to the walkthroughs. Now you're not socially distanced if you're players. The coaches still are, but the players aren't. But everybody can still wear a mask because you're not running hard, you're not bumping into each other. The phase I think he's asking about is the full-scale August camp type preseason workouts. That starts for Arkansas. Some teams started today. In fact, I think I saw Bobby Petrino put a thing up on Twitter over the weekend, and I guess they've already started because they're going to play that late August game with Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So it depends on when your first game is. But Arkansas's, and I think this is throughout the SEC, their first practice, full-scale preseason practice starts Friday.
Right.
So that's when that would start.
And then we have CLAYCOHOG wants to know, will students be a part of the 25% that can attend games at Razorback Stadium if that is indeed the correct percentage?
You know, that was not addressed. Nobody thought to ask that question. We probably should have. I promise you the next time he's on the Hunter Yurchek's on a Zoom, we will ask that question. So I can only speculate, but I cannot imagine a situation where the athletic department said, nah,
no students.
We're not going to have any students. We've got to make some money. We got to get high-paying customers. I don't think they'll do that. My guess is you'll do everything on a percentage basis. If you're only putting 25% in the stands, then I'm saying probably 25% of the usual number of students, that's what you'll do to be fair to everybody.
HOGVILLE says, apparently there are rumblings to allow players to put phrases on the back of their jerseys instead of their names. Think this has legs? Do you think that's a good idea? And will Pittman and Hunter Yurchek think it's a smart thing to do?
Well, I can't speculate on what they would do. I think it's a terrible idea. I think it is going to happen in some places, especially out on the West Coast. I think kind of in the middle part of America, right through the SEC, I don't think that's going to fly. I think athletic directors have enough sense to know that kind of thing is already causing problems. I mean, the ratings for Major League Baseball, and we haven't had the NFL yet, but for the NBA, all of those are down. Now, some people might suggest, well, it's because of COVID and it's weird and there's nobody in the stands, and that could be part of it. But if you go on any social media outlet, Twitter or your local message board, Facebook, you're going to see fans all over the place complaining about what these players in professional sports are doing, kneeling instead of standing up or whatever. Now, if you translate that to the college game where you let some guy put some social justice message on the back of his jersey and it's right there, you know, whatever it says, I just don't think that's going to fly with most fans, and here's why. And I talked to a guy about it that was very adamant that he won't watch college athletics anymore if they do that. And here's what he said. He said, when I walk into Walmart, I don't want to walk in there and have an employee walk up to me and start telling me what his political philosophy is. I don't want to walk in there and have them have their Walmart uniforms on and they have big signs all over what they're wearing that express some political philosophy. I'm the customer. I'm going in there to shop. I'm not going in there so they can tell me what they think about some political idea. So he said, the same thing is true of athletics. I am paying money to go to the game, or I'm watching, which helps get the ratings up, which is part of the TV revenue. And so by doing that, I am, in my own way, helping pay for the scholarships and all the other things that come with scholarships for these athletes. And I'm not doing that so that they can tell me what they think about a certain political issue. I don't care. I've got my own views, and I'm tuning in the game to watch them play, not tell me I like this or I believe in that or I'm for this philosophy or whatever. So again, I just think it's very divisive. I certainly would say this is America, and all athletes have a right to their opinions and to express those opinions, but they probably should do it away from the game, not on the field.
Well, also, it's not just the names on the back of the jerseys or political. They can always wear patches as
Right.
well as what the NCAA was saying. They can have little patches on their jersey to support a certain movement or group that they want
Yeah,
to.
again, that's probably not as big an issue because you won't be able to see it very
Right,
well.
but
But if
it's
you've
still
got a
showing
big
support.
thing across your back,
Yeah.
it's like a billboard. I'm not sure people would be for that.
They also said that it could be something, if you had a cousin or a brother who
Yeah.
passed away, you can wear their name on the back
Just
of your
again,
jersey. So there's
come
that
on.
as well.
Again, can you imagine us doing that?
It's true.
You're on the air right now, and you got a big sign across your dress that I love my brother.
Yeah.
He's a cool guy. I mean, it'd be
get what
kind
you're
of
saying.
strange, So.
All right, our next question comes from Myriad Rocker, who wants to know, have you heard how they'll handle ticket refunds? Credit for next year, cut checks. Also, how do you think they'll shuffle around the ticket holders? Do you think they'll offer refunds for those who don't like or want their assigned seats?
Well, on these refunds, I'm just assuming that you could have it either way you wanted it. You
Right.
could just tell the athletic department, hey, I want my money back. They'd probably take it off your credit card if that's how you paid for it. Or you could say, I just want a credit for next year, and I'm sure they'd be willing to do that. Now, as far as if you did, okay, we're going to socially distance again. So I've got a seat, and let's say it's on about the 40-yard line on the home side, but it's down a little bit low, but it's a pretty good seat. But now, because we've socially distanced everything, they're moving me over to closer to the 20-yard line, and I don't want to be stuck on one end where I got to look around and figure out what's going on. I could look at that and say, you know what, it's just not worth it. I don't want to sit there. My guess is they will give you your money back, because here's what they're going to do. If they're only letting 25% of their season ticket, well, it wouldn't be 25% of their season ticket holders, but it's less than the total number of season ticket holders. So they're going to have people on the list that are not going to be on the original list to get tickets.
Yeah.
So if you don't want that seat, they'll just go to somebody else that's not scheduled to have it and say, hey, do you want this seat? And my guess is they're not going to have any trouble filling 30,000 requests or 25,000 or whatever it's supposed to be. So I don't think you're going to have any problem getting your money back if you don't like where you're sitting.
I was there in 1969, wants to know, at what point in the season are we likely to see the immense talent of Malik Hornsby behind center for the Hogs? Do you think it would be a waste of Malik's talent to not get him in at least 4 games so as to maintain his redshirt season, yet get him valuable playing time for next year?
That was always an issue with Morris, because fans were getting mad because they weren't playing certain players and they didn't play them enough. And how come you didn't? This guy's going to redshirt anyway, but you only played him in 1 game, or you didn't do him. You let him in for 2 plays, and that counted as a game. Here's the problem, especially when you're talking about quarterback and you're trying to win games. And believe me, Sam Pittman wants to win games.
Yeah.
Let's look at it. Provided your quarterback is healthy. And he's going to play the whole game. There's nothing wrong with him. He's playing well. He's healthy. There's only 2 other ways a backup quarterback or any other quarterback gets in the game, and that is you're way ahead or you're way behind. Now, we know which one of those scenarios is more likely, right? So let's say Arkansas is way behind. Well, maybe you might see him in there under those circumstances, but I got to believe that Sam Pittman is out there not just to win games. I think he realizes they just need to look better.
Yeah.
So I just think this is not the year to worry about whether a backup quarterback gets in and plays his 4 games that he's allowed under his red shirt. So I wouldn't look for that to happen. I'm not saying it wouldn't, but I wouldn't count on it.
NC Hog asks, do you have any tidbits on the first couple of days of football practice? I know full pads start on the 6th.
Yeah, again, we talked about that a little earlier.
Yeah.
We have not had a Zoom with Sam Pittman really since before.
It's been a long time.
Yeah, since before those walkthroughs started.
Yeah.
He has not even commented on them. Now, to be honest, that's not a big deal. What are you going to say about a walkthrough? Oh, yeah, they walked through really well. So that in itself was not interesting. I think it's going to be very interesting to have him comment on these full-scale workouts, because that's totally different. Again, that starts Friday. I don't look for anything Friday night. I don't think they'll do it that fast. They probably won't do it Saturday. Probably next Monday, a week from now, would be the earliest that we would hear something from him, and it might even be a day or 2 past that. But we are due to have him on, and believe me, as soon as he comes on and talks about what it's like, what it's been like to have those guys out there. Now, those things are going to be different, because now you've got players running into each other that you can't socially distance in a full-scale practice like that. And I don't believe you can wear masks. So what are some schools doing? We're already seeing this, Tara. Some of them have shown these acrylic masks that they're putting down over the helmets. And you say, well, how could that work? It works in a lot of ways that the other masks do. Yes, you've got air from down here, but that's not usually how COVID would travel. They're worried about it coming straight at you, and that mask will shield you from somebody that's breathing hard, or they sneeze, or in the act of tackling you and it guts all over you or whatever. That shield will help. So I think it's a great idea. I don't know if Arkansas is going to do it, but if they don't, they should, because this may be the answer to the fact that you can't wear a mask in a full-scale practice, but you could have that plastic shield over you. And players have done that in the past for different reasons. They might have a broken nose or whatever, and you've got that plastic shield in front of you. And so I think you could certainly practice that way and probably play a game that way.
Yeah, I think the guys would wear pretty much anything as long as they can play the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chop Suey wants to know, if all of college football adapts an abbreviated schedule and cancellations of certain games this upcoming season, do you think there will be a stigma attached to whatever team wins the national championship, with people saying it's easier to accomplish?
All right, well, let's take a hypothetical national champion.
Okay.
Let's say Oklahoma this year wins this thing.
Yeah.
You think their fans are going to be going, this stinks, it doesn't really matter. They're going to love it no matter what. And I think most fans will accept whoever wins this thing because they understand we're doing the best we can.
Right.
I don't think a lot of people are going to be standing around going, that was terrible. I don't really consider them national champions.
Yeah.
Now, if that's not your team, or if you're
Then
one of those teams that lost, you might say, we lost to them, but it doesn't matter anyway. But here's what I know to be true. Anybody that's alive today that really cares about college football, from now until all of us are gone, whoever that is, we're always going to remember this year's national champion as the COVID championship.
That's true.
You're going to remember that was the year, that was the year that this team won it, and it was the COVID year.
Yeah.
I don't think they will necessarily say it stinks, but it'll just be a kind of an asterisk thing.
Yeah, absolutely. ReadyHog19 asks, if we play a full basketball season, do you see the Hogs competing for or even winning the SEC championship?
Well, I do think they'll play a full basketball season. I think with Isaiah Joe back, this is interesting because, with the way Eric Musselman recruited, there were already increased expectations. Because why? Because he solved two big problems from last year. They have depth now, and they solved their lack of height problem. So with that, there were already increased expectations. But now what happens when Isaiah Joe announces he's coming back? Aaron Torres of Fox Sports Radio jumps up right off the bat and tweets, well, Arkansas is now a dark horse to win the SEC.
Absolutely.
Putting it right there on the line. And then there was a poll I saw online of Razorback fans saying, what do you think the impact of Joe coming back is going to be? And the number one thing they listed was, and about 66% of them said, this will make Arkansas a Sweet 16 team. I think that is a bigger thing than winning the SEC.
Absolutely.
Because you got to go all the way back to when Nolan was here to get a Sweet 16 team. So I think that's where it could really impact. And I do think that we'll play a full season, and I do think that now with Isaiah Joe back, you've got a reasonable expectation of not only getting to the NCAA tournament, but winning a game or two in it.
Pretty incredible that it's just Eric Musselman's second year at Arkansas.
Absolutely. A lot of excitement.
J Hicks 3636 says, as it appears basketball season will greatly overlap football season, will we most likely see a reduced slate of games and might have an SEC-only component as well?
That's so far down the line. I mean, anything could happen. This COVID thing has been really unpredictable, but let's say it kind of goes away. It's just not a big deal by November.
Yeah.
And I mean, that could happen.
You never know.
Then I don't think it affects the season at all. There's also been talk every time I go on the internet, I read about the vaccination that's being developed here or there. And now at first they started talking about will be sometime early next year. Now then you heard maybe next year. And I'm even starting to hear a few predictions that it might happen in December.
Yeah.
So if you get a vaccination that occurs pretty early on in the college basketball season, I think you're much more likely to see a full season. But where it will also impact is the fans. And this is the part that's important as far as I'm concerned, because you have all this excitement now with Isaiah Joe coming back. And it would be a shame if you had to have like 6,000 people in Bud Walton Arena watching these games, because that's what Bud Walton is. When you got a really good coach and you got excited fans, Bud Walton just rocks. It's the toughest place to play in the SEC. So we got to hope that they get a handle on COVID, or there's a vaccination or something, so that by the time we start playing college basketball, we can fill that arena up and make it what it's supposed to be. I'm so tired of this COVID thing. I just want to scream at it. If I could grab it and beat it up, you know. Somebody needs to make a COVID dummy that you can just go out in the backyard. My kid used to have this thing, and it looked like a guy, and you could just go out there and punch it. I'd like to put COVID on that and just bam.
We can make that happen.
Yeah.
We can do that.
We can put it in here and just get angry.
You know, I think the Kentucky game, by the way, was just a great example of Bud Walton Arena this past season. That was so fun.
Yep.
Lanny is back and wants to know, how will the seating arrangement work for the games? Will it start with annual donation members?
Yeah, I think that's logical. Again, that has not been addressed. I think Hunter Yurchek's still trying to figure out how many people they're going to put in there. What's the percentage? But the logical thing is you just go down, what is your donation level? You know, okay, this guy's giving this amount, this guy's giving that amount. The guy that gives the most is probably going to get the best seat.
Only makes sense,
if you don't, now, I suppose they could say, oh, we're going to do a raffle, or we're going to spin the bottle, or we're going to have a big giant wheel, or we're going to pull names out of a hat and just try to be fair. But I think probably the more you contribute, the better seat you're going to have. Yeah,
absolutely. Our last question is from Dark Helmet Hog, who asks, what do you think the chances are of having bowl games this season? Playoffs only, maybe? If there are bowls, would they probably change the 6-win requirement?
Well, here's what we're told, because this was part of that big announcement last week. We're going to have a playoff. So that means those 2 first-week playoff games involving the first 4 teams, that are the 4 teams that are selected for a national champion. Those are bowl games. And that rotates. I don't know which bowl it is for those 2 games this year, but that rotates. So we'll have those 2 bowl games. The championship game is not a bowl game. Now, will there be some below that? Maybe. Some of your bigger bowls below that, if they've got good name opponents. But here's what I think will happen. It will depend on the TV people. If they think that's a big draw, you got this team and that team, and you're going to put them in the Rose Bowl or whatever it is, and you think you can get a big TV audience and make good money off of it on advertising, then that bowl would probably be played. But as you get down towards something, we all know about some of these ridiculous the Joe Blow lawnmower bowl.
The random bowls.
Yeah. You know, you get into some of those that are played before Christmas or right after Christmas, and you're kind of going, come on. And these teams have won 6 games and 7 games. I don't think those games will be financially worth it to play. I'm not the guy that makes that decision. But I guess in answering the question, if you win 5 games, and that might get you into a bowl game with a reduced schedule, I don't think the kind of bowl you could get into will be played.
Makes sense, though.
So.
All right, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Ask Mike, everyone. We'll see you back here next week.